To order this meeting of the Utah County Planning Commission on this May 20th at 5:37 PM. And we do have quorum present, and I do think there might be still one commissioner we saw coming in, so we might have one extra here in a minute. Just as an announcement, there is a sheet at the door. If you do wish to speak to one of the agenda items, then there's a place to sign your name for that. So if you'll make use of that sign-up sheet there before we get into the action items of the agenda. But our first item of business on the agenda is to review and approve the minutes from last meeting, and I think they've been distributed. Are there any edits or changes or objections to the minutes as they've been published?
I move we accept the minutes as sent out.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded to accept the minutes as they've been published to us. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes have been adopted. We do have two conditional use applications, and is it Mosita? One, Mosita, Mosita.
Mine.
There's Lorraine. We will, I guess we have a report from staff we'll start with.
Yep. I've been told it's Mosita.
Mosita,
So,
okay.
Greg Robinson of our staff will handle
Hey,
this
Greg.
first two. So this is a conditional use request to utilize alternative fuels for the previously approved conditional use, under the permit number being CU 2025-01. The staff report is a little bit misleading. I probably should have been more clear. This is not an amendment to an existing conditional use. This is a separate conditional use that is applicable to the previous one. It's kind of a little bit convoluted, but it's important to make that distinction that we are not addressing the conditional use that was previously approved. We are only addressing the alternative use of alternative fuel and the effects of that. So just to be clear, the conditional use CU 2025, which I have incorrect on there.
So this one page that you distributed kind of explains more about that than what was in the packet.
Yeah, so the one page that I distributed is an updated recommendation based to be more clear about the separation between the original approval and this request. So just to go through this, the applicant is requesting to utilize alternative fuels as part of this natural gas power or electrical power generation facility. Their intent is to use these alternative fuels in the situation where the natural gas, their connection to the natural gas line is interrupted. It is not, based on the application, it is not meant to be a consistent use of those alternative fuels, but just as a backup to the natural gas connection that they currently have or propose or have approved through the previous conditional use. They requested this to enhance the facility's energy resilience is the way they stated it, ensuring stable and reliable power during potential natural gas interruptions. The application kind of goes through the location and, I'm not used to doing two things at once. So this is just a more closed in. This is part of a overall facility of solar and specifically for the natural gas. So there's several conditional uses associated with this facility, solar, a natural gas facility, and now alternative fuel sources for that natural gas facility. Just a zoomed out view of where we're at. This is this is the previous conditional use that was approved, and then the location of the natural gas, the liquefied natural gas tanks and the diesel storage tanks. It looks like I spelled wrong again. The dimensions of those tanks were not specified in the application, so it's not necessary unless there's an issue with the height. If they go above 40 feet, which I don't know what those dimensions are, but if they do go over 40 feet, a conditional use would be required to address that. Based on the images that were submitted in the application, it doesn't appear that that would be the case, so. The applicant did not request an extension to the expiration date. However, this is associated with the previous conditional use, which they did request an expiration date to be extended to March 18th of 2030. And since this and the next item is associated with that facility, it seemed appropriate to include that extension on this conditional use. We did send this to the other departments, specifically Public Works and the Fire Marshal. The Fire Marshal is continuing to coordinate with the applicant on the fire requirements. However, when asked, he did want to include a condition that hydrants be required as per his review. Other than that, the applicant is here to address any questions or concerns. And as was stated before, the additional page that I submitted is an updated staff recommendation of the approval language. If you choose to use that, it clarifies the separation between this and the previous conditional use.
I have a
Thank you. Great.
question.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Do we have sufficient water pressure at the place for fire hydrants?
They will, so two things, they will have initial discussions with the applicant. The applicant can probably address this a little more. They're anticipating having a connection come down from Eagle Mountain. However, the tank that is on the next request is there to provide enough, so they will be required to provide enough storage of water to meet fire code requirements. So they will have to have enough pressure to pressurize those hydrants. They will have to meet all fire requirements as per fire code and the fire marshal's requirements.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to speak to your application?
Thank you.
Please
Commissioners.
state your name and
Oh.
who you represent.
I'm
I'm-
switch over to the other.
I'm Greg Probst, and I'm representing the applicant. And just to have a few comments, I'd like to confirm, first of all, that indeed the operation of the backup fuel facilities would be strictly as a backup means to be used in the event of outage on the natural gas system, either on the pipeline itself or on the supply end. So in other words, if we had a contract interruption or a physical maintenance outage or a forced outage on the Kern River pipeline, which supplies our facility, then we would have recourse to the backup fuel. And we would prefer probably let me say, first of all, it's not entirely sure that we're going to need to install either the diesel or the liquefied natural gas. Liquefied natural gas would be the cleaner burning fuel. It would probably be, in most respects, the preferred alternative for us. We'd like to make sure that we're meeting the air emissions requirements in any event, and that we're not burning a fuel such as diesel that would cause higher emissions during any brief time when we would have to burn our backup fuel. The events are very rare. they may not ever happen. And so one of the things that it will be entering into the process is ongoing discussions between us and our customer about what is the degree of additional reliability that we need with respect to the backup fuel. It may well be that we're going to be okay as is because of the numerous shafts, the very reliable pipeline system, and the fact that there's numerous sources of supply up in Wyoming for fuel supply for this facility. So we anticipate, maybe you can help me.
The big one would advance it, yeah.
Okay. No real comment on that. You can see the identified location where we would have the LNG storage tanks, and you can see on the picture an example of these storage tanks. The tanks you see here are what we call bullet tanks. It's a insulated tank, a double tank, because LNG is held at 260 degrees below zero, and it's gasified, and then it becomes just like regular pipeline natural gas. So the idea here is we have a concentrated form, liquefied form of natural gas that would be available in the event of emergency outage on the pipeline system. So that's the concept. It would be a relatively small area. These tanks are various sizes, but they can somewhere around 25 to 75,000 gallons per tank would be typical. And how many of these we would need sort of depends on what range of time that we need to cover. As you probably will recall from last time, we have a very large solar and battery energy system that is actually providing a very large percentage of the electricity that we'll be generating. So we're still working on the question of how we would functionally integrate the backup fuel supply with the regular gas supply. And it will require us to continue our discussions with the Kern River and the various community of gas supply companies before we enter into our contracting. But this is the concept. It's a safety and a reliability matter, and it's something that we do because our ultimate customer, data center, is going to expect that we're delivering around the clock every day to their full requirements. Here's another picture. The picture on top, you could see, would be a typical, a flat bottom tank. These are typically used in larger facilities. I seriously doubt we'd be using it in this case. I think we'll have probably several of the smaller size of tanks, the bullet tanks, that we'd be using. Now, in the alternative, and let me emphasize that, alternative, we won't have both liquefied natural gas and diesel as a backup fuel. It'll be one or the other. Diesel is more commonly used. We could burn them in these turbines as well. The problem with diesel is that it creates more emissions, and it also tends to gum up your machine over time. And so it's something that there's a better fuel, and that's liquefied natural gas. That's becoming very common around the country and around the world for use. It's now shipped all over the world, and it is natural gas. But you have to deal with the issues of how you deal with a super cold material and how you gasify it and prepare it and integrate it with your regular fuel supply. So that's what the request is all about. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Where are you in the process with your negotiations with Eagle Mountain for utilities, for services, for water and disposal of your cooling water?
We actually have entered into an agreement with a development agreement with Eagle Mountain, and we're in the process on the water and water disposal of looking at alternatives still, because we could still conceivably, we have 1,000 acre feet of water rights, and we could conceivably put a well right out at our location instead of bringing the pipeline out. So in that event, if we went in that direction, we would have a well and then our big water holding tank. And then, provision for the fire hydrants and so on and so forth. And that, as Mr. Robinson was describing, we'd be working with the county's fire engineer on the design and construction of that system.
Is that development agreement something that's recently been entered into
Yes.
within like last couple of weeks? Okay, because I talked with a friend of mine out there, and they had heard about the project, but there was nothing had been resolved as far as no agreements as far as connecting to the water system and stuff like that. So I just wondered where that was. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just, out of curiosity, how do you keep it at a minus 260, those tanks?
It takes energy to do that. You have a cooling system that's not different in principle from air conditioning. You have big pumps and compressors.
That's how you do it.
Yep.
Boy, that's a challenge to keep
It
it
is.
that cold.
Indeed, it's a real challenge. There's a lot to it. And so it's not something that we undertake lightly. It's something that we do for the reliability and because that is what the customer will need.
So if you have a disruption in power supply, what's your time frame before those tanks warm up to the point where they become a liability?
Well, we have backup generation. We have backup generation so that we can start, if we need to, we can start and operate one or more of our units with our backup fuel and using the backup generator that we have. We have a separate backup generator that is diesel fueled, and that backup or black start generator will help us start one of the main generators, and then from there we'll have plenty of power.
To keep them cool?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. A couple questions. So why do you all of a sudden need, what happened, something happened in the market that you feel like you're gonna need the extra diesel, or was this kind of ultimately the plan from the start, is to have like maybe a two-phase plan, do this initially first with just the gas and then consider this other kind of a stepwise fashion?
No, the only real reason for this is that as we've just started working with Kern River, and so hypothetically, we're just in a situation where we're early in the process. We are not totally informed on the entire maintenance history and the likelihood of either scheduled maintenance outages on the pipeline or unscheduled forced outages in the future. But it's something that our customer is going to demand. They're going to demand that we have to have 99.99% availability of power from our facility. And in order to do that, we have to demonstrate to them that we've got some sort of backup fuel. And it wouldn't have to be the LNG. It's just that LNG is cleaner than diesel, and we want to make sure that we're complying with the air quality regulations as well. So that's our preference.
Yeah, but why now? Because you had the original application that came out, you were just doing the national, was that, why all of a sudden now you need this backup?
It's not really an all of a sudden. It's just that as you continue on in the process, it becomes clear that we have a requirement for reliable fuel for the facility, and there's still a couple of questions about whether the pipeline system and the supply contracting at the northern end of the pipeline is going to be sufficiently reliable. So that would be the kind of the only thing that, if you could say, has changed, and it hasn't really changed. It's just something that, as we continued to work in the process, became clear that this was an issue that we needed to be careful to cover.
So in some ways, you maybe anticipated that was going to be, like, it's going to be a phase project. You're going to first do one, and then do the diesel and do the
No, it's really just going to be one project, and this backup fuel is really only to be used in the event of you could think about it kind of like an emergency. It's a fuel emergency because we would be losing our natural gas supply of fuel from the pipeline. We always considered that it would be a extremely unlikely event to happen, and we still do. But for us to have that attitude does not rise to the level of assurance that our customer is going to demand. That's really what this is about. They have to be able to finance their facility, put in hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into a data center, knowing that the power is always going to be there no matter what. And so even if there is a fuel supply problem on this pipeline, as unlikely as that has been historically and as unlikely as we think it will be in the future, we need to make sure we can demonstrate to them that we've got this covered. And that's why we're asking for this change now. But it's not like it's a phased project or something. It's just a reliable project.
Yeah, but if that's what I'm confused. If you knew you were going to need this anyways, then why not just do it the first time around instead of having to get a second, application in?
The degree to which, the issue might arise only became clear as we continued to work on the problem.
So, and so that applies to the transportation. So how many more, you're not anticipating you'll need it, but is there going to be an impact on like roads? Now you have diesel, and then you have the liquid nitrogen, and so what, or natural gas. So what impact is that going to have on just on more traffic, more trucks?
There would be a certain number of trucks required to fill the tanks. In the case of liquefied natural gas, that product would be coming from a facility out by Magna that is a specialized LNG facility, and would be specialized trucks, insulated trucks that would bring the fuel over to our holding tanks that I've showed you. In the case of diesel, we could get that product from any one of a number of suppliers, and it could come from a number of directions. But it would all come through the routes through Eagle Mountain and on the county, and we would have the agreement with Eagle Mountain on the roads and the agreement with the county on county roads, and we'd be in full compliance with both of those agreements. And so as we identify first whether we're going with liquefied natural gas or diesel, and then what our haul routes would be once our supplier is pinned down and we know those routes exactly, then we'll be working with county roads to make sure that we are meeting whatever the county wants us to do.
So you don't expect a really huge, more volume of trucks in that area unless you're actually utilizing it?
Yes, that'd be exactly right. There'd be a few trucks when you're filling the facility, and there'd be a few trucks from time to time if we ever have to use it. And then it's likely that at some point, whether it's diesel or whether it's LNG, we would want to use that fuel, clean out the tanks, and refill them with a fresh fuel so that we're sure it's going to burn properly. But in the aggregate, the number of trucks that we would need, it's a very minor amount of traffic, and we'll coordinate fully with the county roads on what that exact load would be. It's different sizes of trucks depending on if you're talking about LNG or diesel. The big LNG trucks are a specialized large truck coming from a facility up in Salt Lake County. The diesel may come through Provo and Spanish Fork, and lots of fuel suppliers can sell you diesel, but once they get around to that part of the county, coming through Eagle Mountain and through the county roads down to our facility, we'll be fully meeting those road requirements.
Because the biggest thing with this application is just the added LNG just seems to be the most, like that could be the most like fire hazard, and that's what people would be most concerned about.
I think so. I think that's fair to say. And then we'll be working with the fire marshal on the size of the tank, the configuration of the tank, and the fire hydrants and everything that we need to do to make sure that that's in full compliance with the county.
Thanks.
What is your comparison on footprint for their storage requirements for diesel versus LNG?
Approximately the same.
To be above ground tanks for your
Yes.
diesel, similar to
Yeah,
those?
it's not going to be that different. On the slide we had before, I think we said 1.5 acres estimated for the unloading zone and the tanks, all of it. So it's a fairly modest. It's a matter of how many hours you want to cover, and it's a very sophisticated modeling exercise to determine how many hours in a facility that you're using primarily solar and battery backup, but then a certain amount of natural gas generation. It depends on your season and the weather, and it's a nightmare to model, but it's a very sophisticated exercise. And what we're trying to do is to get to a level of reliability that our customer and the financial community will recognize so that this project gets approved and financed. And that takes all the approvals to get us there, including all the, working with the fire marshal and working with the roads department, everybody else in the county to make sure that we're complying.
Do you have an example of anywhere else where you guys have this as a model that is
No,
worked well?
we don't, because we're primarily, historically, we're primarily a renewable project developer. And we've primarily done wind projects and solar projects, and sometimes a combination of wind plus solar, and sometimes a combination of wind plus solar plus battery. But, I can say that our engineers, HDR, have a subsidiary that does these sorts of LNG projects not only around the country, but around the world. And it's a very well-accepted technology on the LNG. You just have to make sure that you have competent professionals, proper construction, careful management. But that's not different from anything that you do at a facility like this anyway. It's very consistent with how we have to operate everything. So it's not something that is disturbing or concerning to us. It just means you have to know what you're doing. You have to exercise utmost caution all the time. So
That answer your questions? Okay. Is there any further questions for the applicant?
thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have some who have requested to speak to this agenda item. I'm not sure, do we need to open to a public hearing before we take comment? Not, this one, no. Just for public comment. So we have Holly McKinney. Holly, would you like to speak to this? Okay.
So, I'm Holly McKinney. I was here a month ago to talk to you guys about this whole project, and I don't know, do you guys remember when I said that is in our annexation policy, and they said, no, you're not. Anyway, I get an email from Utah County saying, this email, please note that while this portion of the subject parcel lines within Fairfield City's annexation policy plan, the specific 34-acre project site associated with this conditional use request is not located within the boundaries. So I don't know if you could bring up that map that has the location of the project. Yes, that one. If you would look at that, Fairfield is in the pink, and it is very clear that this project borders more of Fairfield and nothing of Eagle Mountain. We've never denied them annexing into us. Our water line is closer to their project than Eagle Mountain's is, and we actually have a roadway that joins right in with this project. And so I think that it would be beneficial for Fairfield to annex this in if it's going to be annexed into any community. A couple of things that Eagle Mountain is over allocated on water right now as we speak. They have over allocated on housing, on all their developments on water, and so that is a huge issue for them. So I'm not sure how they think they can provide water to a power plant that obviously is not even close to their boundaries, and it goes through my annexation plan. They have not considered Fairfield to even annex them in. It is well within our annexation policy, like I tried to tell you last time. One of the agenda item refers to alternative fuels. That's pretty ambiguous. I would probably suggest if you guys do pass this, as an addition to the conditional use permit, you state exactly what you're allowing instead of saying alternative fuels, because that kind of opens up the door to a wide range of fuels that maybe we don't want out there. Other than that, I just think that if you guys would consider Fairfield annexing them in, I think that we're well within the boundaries versus Eagle Mountain. And I think that it's why are they trying to skip us? You guys need to ask yourself that question, because they're going to be coming through my town and they're going to impact us more than anybody else. And also a good thing to make note of too is that pink square that jogs down right there is methane gas, which is a natural gas that could produce power. So I think that you guys need to take a step back and look at everything, all the impacts of this before you just pass in something. And I also question whether this was notified correctly. It seems like it was not notified correctly to property owners that should have been notified. The guidelines that we have to go by as a town are very strict. You've got to say exactly what is being put on a conditional use permit and who is affected. And I don't think that that was properly done. So anyway, just consider those things, and then keep in consideration that our roads do need to be taken care of if they are going to use them, because I'm telling you, it's a lot easier to come through Fairfield to get to that project than it's going to be to go through Eagle Mountain. And please consider that. So
Could you clarify when you say that area is methane gas? Could you clarify what you mean by
the
that?
little square that comes down that's in bright pink, there's that white square in the middle, right? Yes, it's a municipal landfill. And so they have 17 wells burning methane gas right now. So power is a huge issue that's going on out there. I also have customers that need it, and we are looking at additional power sources to provide for that.
Is that Intermountain Regional?
Yeah.
Which, okay.
Yep, Intermountain Regional Landfill, and then just kitty corner to that is North Point Landfill.
Yeah. They currently don't generate methane.
No, they don't,
So
but
that's
yes,
the reason I was clarifying.
Intermountain Regional Landfill, they actually produce enough methane gas to supply a large quantity of gas for power to do almost 8,000 homes. It's a lot. But power is such an issue out there. But I just think that obviously it borders a lot more of Fairfield than it does Eagle Mountain. I don't think any of that's even in annexation plan for Eagle Mountain. So I find it shocking that they're in a development agreement with Eagle Mountain to take their water, especially when I know that Eagle Mountain is over allocated on water right now. So, and I haven't heard from them that they were in a development agreement, and I've talked to their council members about it. So,
Well, I guess I just would ask for clarification. We don't suggest or control any annexation topics from our side. We're only dealing with the county lands.
Yeah.
And whether they get an agreement with one city or another is outside of the.
right. I just wanted to be on the record that we have never denied an application for them to annex into Fairfield. They are closer to our roads and they're closer to our water line. And it seems like a pretty big land grab to come from Eagle Mountain just so they can have the benefits of a power generation supply when it's clearly going to impact our town more than Eagle Mountain.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So in what ways do you feel like it's going to impact your town more than Eagle Mountain, just because it's closer and?
Well, I mean, it's
roadways?
closer to us, and the other solar company that's down there on the south side, they've came through Fairfield and they've tore up our roads. And so there wasn't anything in the conditional use permit for us to actually get any money back from them to help repair the roads. And that was mainly why I came down to you guys, what was it, a month ago? And I just said to please consider that. And I stated then that this project was in our annexation plan, and they said they weren't. And then I got an email from the county saying they indeed are. They are in our annexation plan. So It's just hard when we're such a small town and then these big projects get permitted and it affects us. And then Eagle Mountain wants to take it because they want the revenue from the power supply. And, it obviously is closer to Fairfield. And if you were to look at who it actually borders, it's Fairfield, it's not Eagle Mountain. So please consider it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for me?
No?
No? Okay.
Thank you. I do have a question for staff before we go to the next. Is what on the notification, can we explain what we did on notification on this?
Sure. We send notifications to all adjacent property owners who are adjacent to
Adjacent
the
property owners, that's
yes.
the requirement for this?
Yep. We have requirements in our ordinance, and we meet those requirements. We send notices 10 days prior to the meeting, and we have a list that we can provide the commission if you want to show that we've sent those. And we specifically sent the email to Fairfield to make sure that they were
The city of,
noticed about this.
to the city
Yeah.
leaders? Okay. So we met the requirements of notification, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So that was Holly. Kirk, I think you were for D1, if there's Kirk Beecher.
That's later on.
And it's what?
That's later on.
That's later on. And then Stan Smith wanted to speak to C1. Is Stan here?
Here, and I didn't mean to put an X in there that I wanted to speak. I just want to hear.
Oh, you want to hear it? Okay, I got it. All right, that sounds good. All right, thank you, Holly. I guess we've gone through everyone that wanted to speak to this item. Is there any follow-up questions for staff?
I have one. So on the original, your original recommendation, item 6, it talks about improvements and maintenance of county roads and whatnot. And then on the new one, is the line item 6 there refer back to the line item 6 on this one?
That was kind of to be more clear that requirement of those improvements and the access route, that those requirements are part of the original conditional use that will be enforced as part of this facility. And this facility is required, it's kind of part of the same thing, but it's not. So this conditional use is contingent on the first original conditional use being constructed and meeting those requirements. Those requirements include the construction of the road, the route, and coordination with Public Works to amend the county road map. We just wanted to be clear that requirement is part of the first conditional use, which still will be enforced, but it's not specific to this conditional use. It's not a requirement of this conditional use because this conditional use is contingent on the previous conditional use. It's weird, but just so that we're clear and we're not, it needs to be, the reason we're doing this is so that it is clear that we're not modifying an existing approval that they have been vested and they've gotten the approvals they were required to get, and we're not opening that up again to address those concerns. The changes were just made to make sure that it's clear that any condition that is required for the original approval, in order for this this conditional use to be utilized, would have to be enforced as part of that part of this approval and the previous approval. Did I confuse it? Did I confuse everybody enough?
Sure. Is it typical to require? I mean, if they do drive through the city of Fairfield or the town of Fairfield or the city of Eagle Mountain, can we put requirements on that, or the city or anyone?
So that's a very difficult. That is a difficult question, mainly because the roads are for public use, and requiring routes and things of that nature can be difficult to enforce, especially when they're in a different jurisdiction. There, and also roads generally are built to a certain standard to allow the traffic that is on there. So those, while we want to ensure that there is safety, and if there is a specific route to provide additional safety, there are certain conditions that we can enact. If it's through a high pedestrian area or next to a school or something that creates a health safety problem that could impact that, then I think that there is an ability for us to impose requirements for that. However, if we're just going to restrict the use of roads, it's really something that's difficult for us to kind of get into. And I don't know if our attorney wants to address that or not. If I didn't cover anything, I'm sure he can fill in
Come
any
on,
blanks.
attorney, let's hear about use of roads.
Use of roads. Well, first of all, I'll take the position that we're not going to regulate anything inside a city. It's simply, we're not going to go there. Whether we've, in the past, we've given cities notice that we're approving a conditional use in the county. That's simply putting them on notice. They have to exercise their rights and their, whatever they feel like they can do to enforce it. The problem you have with roads is, how do you decide that this developer is doing something to a road and it's not the other 500,000 cars that use the road that year? So we don't get into that. And luckily, it's not our job. We don't even have jurisdiction to do that. When we get to the city line, we're done. That's as far as we go. We have no jurisdiction. We have no control. We have no ownership. There's nothing we can do except give notice. We've done that on other conditional uses. I don't know if it's been successful or not, but it's the most that we can do.
We can, how about which town or city they work with or through, or none of, we can't
No,
stipulate any of that in any kind of conditional use.
no.
I don't know. I'm just asking questions to follow up to make sure I know.
We have made recommendations. We have tried to coordinate with other jurisdictions in certain cases. However, as Dale has said, that we like, as much as we can cooperate with those jurisdictions, we do try. But again, as Dale said, we're not able to regulate in somebody else in a different jurisdictions.
Is it possible that both Eagle Mountain and Fairfield have annexation plans for that same area?
Not at this time. Fairfield just recently updated their annexation plan. If I can just kind of, if I recall correctly, and I definitely can be wrong, the boundary comes down this way and follows this parcel this way and then comes straight across this area. The location of this site is right here. That's where their annexation policy plan goes to.
So not quite down to this.
It does cover, so this parcel specifically does have a stem that comes up that way, so it is included in that, but the site for the facility is right there, and the line for the annexation policy plan is right there. And just to follow up with that, the county does not enforce or force annexations on any property owner. It's up to the property owner to decide those things, just to be clear.
Annexation is a city procedure.
Sure.
Has nothing to do with the county. We provide, we mail notices on an annexation, and we have the right to object to an annexation. But we don't participate in the approval, in the review, and we clearly don't force annexations. So we encourage annexations. Property is better regulated inside a city, but if it falls outside a city, even a city's annexation plan, we try to cooperate with them, but we have to treat it as county property. There's nothing else we can do until they actually annex.
And even at that point, the landowner can object to the annexation and decline to be annexed, right?
Right, they have their own rights to object. There's a way to force them into an annexation, but that has nothing to do with us. That is for the cities to do.
I had one more question on my mind, and I just forgot it.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. This may seem like a silly question, but let's just to consider if they did not have an agreement, development agreement with Eagle Mountain, by us approving these permits and conditional uses, is there any implications or that they could go to Eagle Mountain and say, hey, this has been approved for the county, blah, blah, blah. Does it give them any extra strength to go to Eagle Mountain and have Eagle Mountain approve this facility or grant them utility access or anything like that?
I can't see that. I mean, obviously there's going to be impact on the city, and there may be some incentive for the city to work with the developers. Not just solar developer, any kind of developer, where there may be an impact, and it may be helpful for a developer to coordinate with the city. And I can probably think of a few instances where a property developer, as in residential development, has used the county kind of in a way to kind of utilize a leverage with the city to kind of cooperate with them. In this case, I don't know that there's necessarily any leverage. I think that the developer has found an area that is conducive to their land use, and that they would have developed this. And they're probably, I mean, they may be happy to stay in the county the entire duration of their development. So it just depends on the developer and the impact to the city, and the city's willingness to kind of coordinate with them and see what they can do to cooperate in the development of the property.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just, maybe one last question, the question I was thinking of. Under what conditions would we, I mean, a conditional use, under what conditions would we deny? I mean, what are the, just because we don't like it, it has to be a safety consideration, what are the reasons we could deny?
That just happened to be a topic of last month's
Right.
training.
I just wanted to hear it again.
Yeah. So you would have to find a detrimental impact that could not be reasonably mitigated. Now, staff is good at identifying those. If it's not in a staff report, you should feel pretty comfortable that they've looked at those. However, if one comes up in your minds in a comment, and you feel like, we feel like there's a detrimental impact here that has not been addressed or has not been reasonably mitigated, you need to speak up. We need to look at it. Either, if we can address it here tonight. If not, we can continue and get you some more information on it. But your hands are tied in a sense that you have to identify that detrimental impact and articulate that it has not been reasonably mitigated by the measures that we've imposed with these conditions.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further discussion from the commission?
Yeah, so you talked about Eagle Mountain having, they're over allocated in their water usage. And then you mentioned that the LNG will require a lot of water to keep it cool. So how is that? So that seems like kind of an issue. Is there going to be? I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, it's why it's helpful to have people coming from these different communities, because I mean, I'm in a community where we're impacted by water usage, and that can be a really limiting factor.
We would not be
oh,
using
sorry.
water to cool.
I thought that's what you said, that you need water.
No, you're using pumps. You're using pumps, and it's sort of similar to an air conditioning system, where you have a medium that provides the cooling.
Refrigerant.
And you have pumps and compressors to provide the cooling. Because water would not cool this. It has to go down to 260 below zero.
So maybe I can also clarify. So they did indicate for the turbines that they anticipate using water for cooling. The liquefied natural gas will not need, will have its own cooling system. Also to clarify, the water that they have are in water rights, which means that they have the water. It's their water. It is only how so basically, like Greg was talking earlier, they could put a well in, locate their water rights at that point, and pull 1,000 acre feet of water out of that. Well, I mean, it's kind of, but they have a sufficient amount of water. 1,000 acre feet is a significant amount of water, and they have that water. Based on what they've represented, is they own those water rights, and so they would have that right to be able to pull that water if approved by the state to pull that water from that location and supply the water themselves.
Historically, when we started talking with Eagle Mountain, one of the early things we were talking about was the possibility of us providing a portion of our water rights to the city, and in exchange, they would provide us water for our facility, and then we would give them back a moderate amount of wastewater that came off of the facility, and then they would dispose of it. So that's why we started in the discussion with Eagle Mountain in the way that we did. And that discussion also included discussion of routes and how would we get access to the site. And so it's not like there was an intent to somehow go around or avoid Fairfield. It's just that we had this historic relationship where we started talking about issues with Eagle Mountain. And another part of the story is that that's the likely location where our customers would be, is at data centers to be located next to the other data centers inside Eagle Mountain. So, history is most of what's going on here. And let me just say, by way of future discussions, we have no problem with talking to Fairfield if there's additional opportunity for a route that makes sense to a contractor, whether it's the fuel supply or whether it's a construction contractor. We have no problem in talking to them.
Can you tell me if the data center that you're working with, does it have any land in Fairfield?
Probably need to come to the mic to.
Yeah.
This is not part of the meeting.
Yeah, I don't know, we need to, if you guys want to talk after, that's fine.
Yeah, we're
Thank you.
happy to talk.
So a question for staff regarding water. I know a lot of the other things that we've done, especially the last couple of years, dealing with lots, subdivisions, and divisions and whatnot, there was a requirement to verify water rights. Is there anything required on this to verify those water rights? I mean, I know that I'm not, stating that their water rights aren't valid, but that has been something that's been a huge problem in other areas of the county, where people would say they had water rights and they weren't necessarily verified with the state engineer. Are we taking that into consideration with this project?
So generally, the reasons typically we require verification of water rights are generally because it's a requirement in our ordinance. We don't have a specific requirement for water in our ordinance for electrical power generation facility. Also, it's It's always difficult verifying water rights with the state when they allocate them, because once they allocate them, they say that they have water rights. And yes, they would have to go through a change application with the state. And if they decided to pull those water rights from that location, which the state would have the opportunity to review those and verify that the water was there, but we don't have a specific requirement for the amount of water for a facility such as this.
I guess I'll just say one last thing. So just for the record, I'm uncomfortable at a couple of things, and I know there's two sides of the story. But I'm uncomfortable with Fairview, is Fairfield coming, and feeling a little uncomfortable with the fact that they're going to be getting most of the impact via the roads, but not really receiving the benefit. And I'm just wondering, from the county perspective, I can see that could be a foreseeable conflict in the future if things get annexed. And I'm just hearing what she's saying, and obviously I'm not hearing what they're saying, but that makes me a little uncomfortable that they're not benefiting, but yet they're getting most of the impact. And I just want that to be noted. That makes me uncomfortable. But also too, I think first, she's here, but maybe there'd be a couple other people that were here if emails had gone out even 3 weeks before.
We mail notices. We don't generally email.
Or like mail notices.
Yeah.
And then she can get around and she could let people in the community know. Because, communication, it takes a while for people to take note of things.
Sure,
So,
I understand that. There's also, just to be clear, that the problem is that we have certain requirements when we receive an application to be able to get that on the next available agenda. Our requirement is 28 days prior. We don't have a lot of time to review, send out notices, and make sure that, and also our ordinance has a specific requirement for 10 days to notice. And I do, obviously, I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you that generally it's really nice to have more input into these types of discussions. But it's also, there's a balance between both the applicant's ability to do it and also the public's right to review and have proper notices. So I understand that.
But the notice requirement is adjacent properties.
The notice requirement is adjacent properties, correct.
So whatever other notices we did was just
Beyond what was required in our ordinance.
beyond what was required. If there's a detrimental impact to roads in Fairview, then they would have to deal with that, or they would work with the county, or whatever would come out of that, because like you said, the roads are public roads.
And the city controls those roads. The city controls who drives on those roads. They control their condition, their upgrading. That's a city issue, and they will take whatever action they believe is necessary.
And condition number 6 addresses the road issues within the county where we do have control
in the county,
and
yeah.
jurisdiction.
So also in the area that the Fairfield has the annexation that is not within Eagle Mountain, those roads are being improved by the applicant. They are paving those roads. They are putting those roads in. So those roads will be required to be installed at a county standard for them to be able to get access to that facility, and then they will be required to review this condition of those roads prior to and after the development of that project.
And those are all roads that we've reviewed with the previous application, if I remember correctly. And that was something that we already saw.
Correct. Yeah. So you mean the solar applications? Yeah, we did review those. This one is different because of the fact that this facility will be occupied. This upgrades that requirement to paving those roads, where before they would be able to get access on a sufficiently gravelled road. This one would require them to pave that road.
Is there, so in your report, was there a detrimental impact that was still
There's always an impact. As far as any impacts that couldn't be mitigated by mitigating or reasonable requirements or conditions, I did not, in my review, find anything that couldn't be mitigated. Commissioner Davis brought up some really good points. She emailed our office earlier about traffic, and I think they're very valid points, and I think that they're important to address. And in the process of coordinating with the applicant, I'm sure that we'll try to coordinate with the adjacent cities where those access roads are going to come and see if we can coordinate with the applicant to utilize those routes.
Liquid natural gas versus diesel.
In the approval language that I amended did include in the recommendation that the Utah County, I'll just read it, that the Utah County Planning Commission approved conditional use application, a request to use liquefied natural gas and diesel fuel as an alternative fuel source accessory to the, so it does specify what fuel
Use
sources
either
they
one
could
of
use.
those, right?
Yeah, they did not specify which one this would give them the flexibility to use either liquefied natural gas or diesel fuel.
But either one they use, they'd have to comply with state and federal, I don't know, I read it in here, right? I mean,
Correct. They'd have to meet all requirements as per either any state
State,
requirements or federal requirements.
federal, state, and local
Yep, correct.
requirements. Okay.
I'll just make one last note.
Okay.
It would be nice if, is it Mosita? Mosita would reach out, to Fairfield and to have some kind of communication there, because you're right adjacent to them. And I don't know, it's like we want to be good neighbors. So
Hi, I'm Adrienne Bell. I'm representing Enyo. Just
representing who?
Enyo, the developer that owns Mosita Energy. Just to respond to that, we've been working with Fairfield for over 5 years. So we are, we've been involved with their planning process. We have a portion of the project within their community. So we've worked with Holly and her team. We have very open discussions with them on a regular basis. And also to clarify one other point, we're not anticipating using Fairfield's roads. Our traffic and infrastructure is on the eastern border of the project site that will go up through Eagle Mountain. That's where we're focusing our road construction. That's where we'll be focusing our access. That's where we will be directing our deliveries and our traffic to the site going down the road that Greg mentioned that we're constructing. So our goal is not to impact Fairfield. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Thank you.
With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm a little confused on which one I should use to make my motion.
I think it's this one. Yes.
Or no, the one that was passed out today. Okay. I make the motion that we approve the conditional use permit application that is outlined on this page, including the 9 conditions on this staff recommendation.
Is that adequate description?
Perhaps recite the number, if you would.
Cite the number, the C.
CU 2025-02.
Thank you.
And as a, I know you made the motion, as a question, is this now posted or is this added?
Part of the record. Sorry, it is part of the record.
Part of the record, okay.
So moved.
I'll second that motion.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion before we vote? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Roll call.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, was there,
No, I'm good, yeah.
so we're in unanimous aye, so that conditional use recommendation, now this goes on to the county commission.
It does not. This is
This is
you are
final
the body
decision.
that
Okay,
approves
so
this.
that is approved.
You are the land use authority for conditional uses.
Okay, that is approved. So we now move to another conditional use
Yes. Yep.
that's the same applicant, right?
Same applicant, same procedure.
Same
This
procedure,
is
okay.
same idea of this is something that's contemplated in the ordinance. We're just looking at detrimental effects, anticipated detrimental effects that to be mitigated.
Okay. And do we have a staff report? We'll start there.
So similar to the previous one, this is a conditional use that's dependent on the construction and requirements of meeting the approval or the conditions of the original power generation plant. This is specifically for the height of the exhaust stacks and the height of the water tanks, the water tank for fire suppression. The exhaust stacks, they are asking for a height of 80 feet, which is the maximum height for a structure like this would be 40 feet. The conditional use allows that unmanned structures to exceed that through the conditional use process. They are requesting the additional height to meet air quality standards and also to mitigate noise associated with their facility. As similar, the applicant didn't request a termination date extension, but staff has included the termination date to coincide with the first conditional use for the electric power generation plant, which is March 18th of 2030. I keep forgetting to do this. Again, the same site, same location. The exhaust stacks are associated with the turbines, which are highlighted in the boxes. They have been approved for up to 12. In the previous conditional use application and the meeting associated with that, the applicants did state that they may not require all 12, but they have been approved for 12 turbines. Each turbine would have a exhaust stack associated with that. The water tank is highlighted. That water tank is requested to be up to 40 feet tall to provide sufficient fire coverage for that facility. The application includes conditions associated with that. There wasn't anything specific to this recommendation, but it does include similar conditions to what was that would have to be met as part of the conditional use 2025-1. So that was the original one. So hopefully that covers it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those as well.
I have a question. Oh, and maybe I just read this wrong. In the staff recommendation, their recommendation is to approve a request for the height of the exhaust stacks to exceed 40 feet and the water tank to exceed 20 feet. But in the staff summary, it says that they were previously approved for 80 feet.
If I did say, so
the facility was previously approved to include up to 12 generators, with each generator requiring an 80-foot exhaust
maybe
stack.
bad grammar. The facility was approved up for 12 generators. Each one of those generators would require a stack. It was intended that that sentence be separate, that they were approved for 12 generators. Each of those generators will require an exhaust stack. Each of those exhaust stacks will require conditional use to exceed 40 feet up to 80.
I see. So we just approved the
facility and they
before, but not the height.
Yeah, so the current approval for that facility would not allow any structure to exceed 40 feet.
Okay.
This conditional use would allow the stacks and the water tank to exceed the minimum required height as per our ordinance.
Okay.
Hopefully that's clear. I'm sorry about the grammar.
What types of detrimental impacts does this have other than aesthetics or view, or I don't know, are those detrimental impacts that we consider?
There can be requirements for appearances there have been conditional uses where that's been a case, where they've mitigated sites or different things of that nature. Mainly, probably the biggest issue with the conditional use that is being mitigated is the reason that they're asking for the additional height is the air quality and noise. So the request is so that they can mitigate detrimental effects, and by asking for the additional height, those effects are hopefully being mitigated.
The location of this site is kind of on the backside of whatever that is, that mountain, right? What is
Yeah,
it?
so
What's that called?
West Mountain.
Lake
Mountain.
Oh, sorry, Lake
Lake
Mountain,
Mountain,
West
yeah.
Mountain. I always get it backwards.
So it's not, I mean, at least, it's not even visible from this side, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be visible from this side, and it's going to be adjacent to some topography that's going to exceed that height. So from the other side, they're probably not going to be as visible as well. Not to say that they won't be visible. They're 80 feet tall. They will be visible. However, when they're adjacent to other things that are breaking up that, they're less noticeable, I guess, is probably the correct term.
Mr. Chair, this is Bryce, staff. It's also important to remember that we're only considering the stacks above 40 feet and the water tank above 20, is it?
20, yes.
So you're not considering the visual impact or any detrimental effect of the stack in its entirety, only that portion that would be above 40.
Yeah, because it's already been approved.
Well, the ordinance by right allows
Allows it all.
40, and then it allows an expansion through the conditional use process. Similar to Greg's answer, your previous question, it's generally in the past, similar requests have been associated with effects related to visual impact and on occasion some safety for fall zones, but those are usually mitigated through the building code and engineering standards. So there has been go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that where those have been identified as potential detrimental effects, some of the mitigating conditions have been non-reflective paint, no logos, those type of things. So,
I have an additional question.
Yes, please.
So I noticed that we have in condition number 3, we have a maximum height stated for the stacks of 80 feet, but I don't see a companion one for the water tank. It seems like those would go together. We should have both of those in there. Is there a reason to not?
Yeah, you're correct. I should have added. So the approval does allow it to exceed 20 feet, but you're right, it doesn't have a maximum height. So they are requesting 40 feet, and it would be appropriate to add that conditional use.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Apparently, I'm falling asleep.
I fall asleep.
Great.
It's
So
warm in here.
we'll probably add the friendly amendment to 40 feet on the water.
Occasionally.
So I have a question, and I know that in the prior approval of the conditional use permit, we talked about fire hydrant placement and approval of the fire marshal. A 40-foot water tank won't provide the minimum fire flows for that, so are you guys addressing that with pumps? And I guess we could wait for the owner applicant to address that, but 40-foot won't address fire flow. That height alone won't provide you fire protection. So I assume that with the approval of the conditional use permit and the approval of the fire marshal, that all of that would be addressed with his approvals.
yeah, I mean, independent of this process, those codes need to be met. And so the hope would be that their design is tailored to meet that requirement.
Correct.
Do you know
and-
if we need to adjust this 40 feet according to those requirements?
I don't know if the
So
fire
the-
marshal's
yeah,
done
so
that
the-
in-depth
the-
of
yeah.
review.
My bad. So the fire marshal hasn't had plans to review this. They would probably require those plans to be able to review that. As Commissioner Love did state, they could augment that through the addition of pumps. Also, the fire marshal, like Bryce was saying, there are specific requirements for fire flow, the amount of flow, and also the amount of pressure, which they would have to meet separate from our approval requirements. And that would be addressed in condition number 2, that they would have to meet any applicable zoning, building, health, public works, and fire safety requirements.
And those things, if they are in conflict with any other conditions, would be the primary that would take precedence?
So if I understand, if they would need to come back and then ask for additional height to meet that fire flow requirement, then they would have to return to this based on this, the approval for a maximum of 40 feet, if that was required.
Thanks.
I have a question for Commissioner Love. A little perspective here. That power plant, Rocky Mountain Power Plant by Vineyard, how tall are those stacks? Any idea?
Sorry, I can't answer that
Don't know
question.
that.
I'm not
Okay.
sure. 120 feet comes to mind, but those are the cooling towers, right? That you're talking about. So they're not 120 feet, but I know that at one time they had talked about putting in some poles up to 120 feet, but I'm not even sure if they've got poles that high now. So sorry, can't answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Should we have the applicant speak to the request?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Have that again. Thank you.
Just gonna switch over really quick. The second one, sorry.
This one?
Yep.
Oh, let me get the.
Okay, so to focus in on the stack height. The reason we're requesting the increase up to 80 feet from 40 feet, we actually had this in our original application, and we didn't call it properly to the attention of staff in time for it to get noticed, included in the notice. So this originally was a notice issue, so sorry about that. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that we have things corrected. And the 80-foot is the standard design height by the manufacturer, General Electric. Part of the reason that they have it that tall is for emissions. The rest of it is for noise control. And they actually have continuous emission monitoring equipment inside the stack to monitor nitrogen oxides, to make sure that those are kept in compliance. That's continuously monitored right inside the stack. And the other thing is that they have noise reduction baffles inside the stack to, I don't know how they work, but they decrease the amount of noise associated with the facility. And so that's their standard design. They can be done less than that, but how much less is a matter of contention and individual site hard engineering. I am aware of some facilities that have been down around the 60-foot level, but if you're trying to get it at 60 feet, then you have to make sure that you're able to meet your air quality requirements while doing that, and making sure that you're meeting your noise requirements. So, and on the 40-foot water fire tower, the whole process there will be working with the fire marshal to design and have that engineered to meet the county's requirements. So that's what we'd be doing, and we'll have the pumps as required to have the pressure so that from the hydrants you have sufficient water pressure and volume to meet the fire suppression requirements. I don't know the shape of the tank and the size of the tank ultimately. This is going to be an iterative process with your fire marshal. And so that'll determine how what the final height actually is. This gives you one perspective on what you see out there. This slide shows the stack heights from
Way in the distance there,
way
you're
in the
showing what the
distance.
stacks would look like in the distance.
This is from the nearest residence to the project site, which is 2.5 miles away. And this is what that party could see from their house. Now, there is another thing out here that did not get added to this model simulation, and that is the existing power line. There is an existing power line that has towers that are 120 or 125 feet, big lattice towers that run along parallel to this road. In fact, it would be shown on the next. Now, here's a model showing what the same stack heights would look like from the turnoff from Lake Mountain Road, which is a mile away. And as you can see from that perspective, the 125-foot lattice towers appear to be way taller than the 80-foot stacks. That's because you'd have to go back. These towers are around 1,000 feet apart, and you have to go back 5 towers away to get back to a point that's an equal distance with where those actually are, even at a mile away, because 5,000 feet. So, and you'd see even a greater difference between the perceived height of the towers and the perceived height of those stacks if you're further away, like this 2.5 mile. And if I were to give you a similar, in fact, I can find one, similar representation. Here's a representation from inside of Eagle Mountain City, which I know is not directly material to your considerations, but you can see here what our facility looks like in relation to what the metadata center that is out in Eagle Mountain looks like right now. We're way out in the distance. We're that little blip way out in the distance. So this is even further away than the 2.5 mile. It's more like, about 7 miles at that residence location. So truly, it's a remote location. You don't see a lot out there, and what you see are mostly going to be the lattice towers of the existing power line, which is way taller than our stacks would be. So, any further questions I can
Any questions for the
respond?
applicant?
I guess the remaining question would just be the height of the water towers, whether or not the 40 is sufficient for you to have the pressure.
Totally sufficient,
Okay.
because we won't be relying on the elevation to create the force behind the water. We'll be using pumps to create that pressure. So I don't even know that we need 40 feet, to be honest with you. But whatever it is, we're going to figure out with the fire marshal, and that's what we'll do.
I think your bigger problem will be the amount, the volume of your water needed for
Right.
fire
It's going to
flows,
be big.
storage.
It'll be big.
So with up to 12 units, is it, I don't know, I don't know if this is part of our conditional use permit we've already granted, but are they going to be uniform? You're not going to have one 70
Oh,
feet and the next one over 80 and then, one, with, I don't know, one that looks, you're not going to have different shape. You're going
It's
to,
the
these are all going to be
exact same-
identical as is your plan right now, right?
Exact same machine times 12. It's a General Electric LM6000 PF Plus, meaning it's dry low combustor, meaning it uses a dry low combustion process to control oxides of nitrogen rather than using water injection to control nitrogen. The only water injection we do, which is why we use so little water, is because we do inlet cooling as well in the summertime when it's hot out to drive down the temperature of the air that's coming into the machine such that it will produce more power. But it's very efficient and effective. That's why we've chosen the technology, and we are way less than 1,000 acre-feet of use. I don't even think we hit 100, do we? Okay. It's not 1,000. We've got a huge margin, and so on the fire, it's a matter of storage, and we'll be working with your fire marshal on that, and so we'll satisfy his requirements. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you on that. And I know Holly already left. Stan wanted to hear about number 1 and 2. You've heard about it. Do you want to speak to it at all? No? Okay. I think we've got all our requests to speak taken care of. Is there any further discussion on the commission? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion I would move that the Utah County Planning Commission approve conditional use permit CU 2025-03, request for the height of proposed exhaust stacks to exceed 40 feet and water tank to exceed 20 feet as part of an electrical power generation facility, subject to staff findings included in the staff report and the conditions items 1 through 9, with an amendment to condition number 3 to include that the height of the water tank to not exceed 40 feet.
Second?
Go ahead.
Second?
What is the height of the stacks in the motion?
It's
80 feet, okay.
Yes.
80 on the stacks, and she specified that in number 3 that the water would be 40 feet.
40 feet.
So it's been moved and seconded with an amendment to approve the staff recommendation. Is there any further debate or discussion on this before we vote? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Again, we've got a unanimous vote in the affirmative, so that's been approved. Okay, we have on our agenda Section D here, an agricultural protection area for the Relief Mine Company.
Yes, our planner who normally does these, I guess there's graduation going on now or
Oh,
something.
is there
So,
graduations this time of year?
Greg's going to be an all-star and step in and pinch hit, and I'll assist a little bit as needed. But Greg will give you a brief presentation.
So this is a request for an agricultural protection area. An agricultural protection area is a protection that property owners using agricultural or practicing agricultural can utilize to protect themselves from certain I don't know what the best term is, complaints that may arise from the operation of their agricultural operation. Sorry. It protects from nuisances, complaints, and it also allows protection from zone changes or zoning regulation changes. The state code requires that it requires that they are protected from those nuisances. The protection from zone changes means that they will not be, any changes that are associated with that property, they are still under the same zoning regulation and zone requirements as what at the time that they were approved. This is a benefit to ag operators, just to be able to protect themselves from any encroachment or any complaints from encroachment that may come from development.
Does it also, I'm sorry, does it also protect from eminent domain type?
It does add another layer of protection from eminent domain. So they would anybody that would have to go any jurisdiction that would like to go through eminent domain would have to go through another layer of protection in order for the ag protection in order to do that. Generally, it's not something that most jurisdictions want to mess around with. Also, just to follow up with that, the property owner in ag protection does have the ability to get out at any point without any cost to them. They can make that request to our office, and that goes through the process, the state required process to be removed. And they also are allowed to take advantage of any underlying uses in the zone, any buildings or other uses that they want to do associated with that. Also, it runs with the land, meaning that it's not associated with an individual property owner, but it goes from, if they sell the property, that ag protection remains. There are certain requirements by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is a recommending body to the County Commission. They will make a recommendation, or you are required to make a recommendation to the County Commission, who will make the final decision regarding any new agricultural protection area. These are state mandated roles to analyze the objectives and policies for this area, to apply state code criteria, which I'll get into in the next slide. Recommend any modifications if there needs to be any modifications, and then review any objections to the proposal, which to date we haven't received any objections to this proposal or modifications. And then finally, to make a recommendation to the County Commission. This is the criteria set by state code. First, is the property currently being used for agricultural production? Is it zoned for agricultural use? Is it viable for agricultural production? And will anticipated trends in agriculture support a continued agricultural use? We'll kind of go over the criteria a little bit in a second. This is the area that's being requested to be included in the agricultural protection area.
The yellow.
Yes, sorry,
Small,
yeah.
yellow
I'll zoom
area,
in a little bit more. So this is the area that is within the Salem City Annexation Policy Plan that is adjacent to Salem City. The area is about 175 acres owned by the same property owner, the Relief Mine Company. Current uses include growing alfalfa, other grasses, and grazing cattle. Their request is for crop production and for grazing. That was what they requested, and it's important that what they request is what is being protected against. So they need to request specifically what they're doing on the property in order to be protected from. If they do something besides those, even if it's agricultural, the ag protection would not protect them against those. However, they could easily modify the ag protection to include those uses. But their request only includes grazing and crop production. These are a couple slides that identify prime farmland. Prime farmland is a designation by the USDA that kind of identifies areas that are most suitable for growing crops. The areas underlined in blue are the areas that are identified as prime farmland based on those criteria that the USDA sets. That is about 10% of the area. The rest of it is not suitable for, is not prime farmland, but suitable for grazing and other similar type agricultural uses. This is the zoning that exists on the property on the side on the right. It is zone RA5, which is a zone designated as an agricultural zone in both our land use ordinance and also in our general plan. The other areas in the CE1 zone is not specifically defined in our land use ordinance or general plan as agricultural area. However, the CE1 zone includes many permitted uses that are agricultural in nature, including grazing. I think there are a couple images that kind of show the area. The staff report included kind of a review of the criteria and we kind of went over some of those. Let me just go back to those criteria again, just so you kind of can see those. So it is currently being used for agricultural production. It is zoned for agricultural use. They have been using it for agricultural purposes, so it appears to be a viable agricultural production, viable for agricultural production. And there aren't any trends that appear to not support continued agricultural use of the
What do you
area.
think, what does trends mean, like construction and
I-
development going on around it?
So I will tell you that I'm not the expert, and it's a difficult thing to kind of. I've tried to find examples or reviews or statements that kind of clarify what was intended by that. It is state code. My best guess is that it just means that there aren't any trends that would negate the continued use of, like, any kind of agricultural advancements that would negate the use of the property for agricultural use, is my best guess. I'm sorry, maybe the attorney's office can give us a better clarification, but it's not clear, and most of the
Come on, Farmer
things that I
Dale.
looked at didn't really show.
We got a farmer on our
Yeah,
board.
we do have probably someone more expert in it than in agricultural protection areas than I am on our planning commission as well. So
Could you go back to those pictures, please?
sure.
The upper left picture, there certainly appears to be excavation and some type of development or something going on with that. Is that parcel, is that showing a parcel
That
that's
it-
part of this?
That is not part of this parcel. There is a significant development. I believe it. We have a representative that probably can speak to that. Or
We can talk about that, but it's not our property.
oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Dairy property,
So it's
right?
I don't yeah okay so I don't believe, and I wasn't the one that took the pictures. I don't believe that this is part of that property. As far as I'm aware, it's continued to be used similarly to what it has been used in the past. And unfortunately, the applicant is not here today to be able to clarify that any more than that. So
I have one question. How does the Relief Mine Company get into agriculture instead of mining?
So the Relief Mine Company owns a lot of different property. If you want to go to the GIS map. Oh, never mind. I didn't bring it up. They own multiple property. This property has been is not part of the mine. The property that they own a lot of the hillside. The relief mine that kind of I don't think I can. Oh, right. Sorry. If you want to zoom out or go, that's me. I get to do that. Sorry. So north of that section, so you can see the kind of where that. Yeah, I don't know that I'm not going to be able to point. So the property that they're requesting is not part of that relief mine. It's farther to the north from that location where the actual mine is. And from my understanding, the only mining that they're doing currently is more for gravel than anything else. They're not doing any additional mining in the mine that I'm aware of.
And with it being in an ag protection zone, the use wouldn't be able to change over to mining or critical use environment
So
type of things, right?
they could utilize any use allowed in that zone currently. If this is approved, they could change the use. However, that use, if it's not part of the approved agricultural protection area, meaning it's not associated with crop production or grazing, that's not protected by the agricultural protection area. They could start using it as a mine, but that's not protected under our ordinance. However, a mine isn't an allowed use in the RA5 or CE1 zone, if I recall.
Okay.
So just to, hopefully that clarifies it. Probably made it worse.
Just, I assume the red is Salem City, is that correct?
Correct.
And the Woodland Hills is the green?
Yes.
Okay. Just to speak to this, that there's a new development, several hundred homes and a hotel and all of this stuff that directly adjoins this piece. And I'm sure I'm not familiar. I do know Boyd Warren, but I'm not familiar with the other folks, whoever's developing this.
Oh.
But anyway, it's I'm sure the impetus for this is to protect this area from the new neighbors that are coming in up there. And I would speak in support of making this a ag protection zone.
Okay, any further questions for staff? Sorry. Are you the applicant? Are you?
I'm an adjacent property owner.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, before you speak though, is the applicant here? No.
They were not able to attend.
They weren't able to be here, okay. So you're here you're
My
on
name
the
is
list
Kurt
as
Beecher.
an adjacent property.
My
owner.
name is
Okay.
Kurt Beecher, and I'm
Okay,
representing Central Utah Water Conservancy District. Sullivan knows me quite well.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. And if you go to the county map there and zoom in on this area. Okay, so the area that is being worked on or considered here is that one area that's not in Salem City, right there in the middle, and then the parcels adjacent to it to the east, over to those 5-acre lots that are along that long edge. Those are privately owned. The ones to the north that are 1-acre lots are privately owned. Everything to the west and north, except for where the 5 homes are there in the middle, just east or just west of the city tank property, the finger that sticks out to the right there, that's owned by the district. We own 65 acres there. We're planning on building a water treatment facility on that site. We own the gravel pit that's there. And we're actively designing and working on that design right now. Normally, I'm on a city planning commission in Payson, and normally when people come, they whine and they complain. I'm here to say we have no issue with this. So it's not a problem. Now, Treehouse Park, which is directly to the west of the parcel that's there, kind of inscribed in between the Salem City boundaries, is it's about a 500-acre, 450-acre parcel that will have luxury homes, townhomes, condos, a water park, a classic golf course, all those kind of things. I'm sure that's why Boyd and Company are doing this, so that they're protected from the complaints when they're next door. Because the area there that's in the inscribed area, they actively run a lot of cattle on that. They run cattle on that all the time. We actually run some cattle on the properties to the north by lease with a Salem resident as well, until we use the land as well. So we actually are using it for grazing as well on the property. We have no issue with it as far as the district. And so just so you know, that's all I wanted to say. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Just thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate
agree.
that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So, and that was, as we've talked about agricultural protection zones in areas in the past, that's, one of the concerns I've had, and this doesn't have anything to do with Central Utah Water, but Timbernoe Special Service District has lines that go through an agricultural protection zone, and that creates some issues.
So does the district.
Yeah. And I think you guys had to reroute
Redid.
the line going out to Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs because of that. That's the only thing that I guess is a minor frustration, because I certainly respect the desire and the need for people to protect what uses go on in their on their private property and stuff like that. The concern I have is in some of those other cases where infrastructure either already exists or makes sense to go through these, that there should be some allowances that they could be worked with the property owners to give that permission or an easement or a right-of-way to install those utilities. By and large, those utility companies make the homeowner or the property owner whole after construction. Yeah, there's always going to be a few instances where it maybe hasn't been 100%, but based on my understanding of the agricultural protection zone as well. It was created how many years ago?
About 1996.
A long time ago, you know. And to my understanding is there hasn't been one request to remove or grant a variance to those agricultural protection zones granted in the entire time that that's been in existence, because they do have a lot of power and they're backed up in that. So I just, you know, I'm glad that you're here to say that
We don't feel that
you
it'll
guys
have any
support it.
detrimental use to adjacent to our property. So
Yeah, because that's something that, you know, they're not going to stop issuing building permits, and, you know, infrastructure has to go in to support those building permits when they are issued. And so I just, you know, I'm glad that this doesn't affect that. And, you know, because there are other projects.
that's why
and
I'm
areas
here,
that
is to
have-
support it, because in all honesty, like I said, I don't ever hear support when I'm sitting in your chair. Okay? It's always
appreciate
the complaints.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So again, I want to ask a question to staff. Now, I know this is a recommendation, goes to the commission, the county commissioners. What justification would we come up with to deny, to not recommend this? I mean, like, I'm trying to think, I'm seriously trying to think, what's the reason we would
Greg
deny
kind
this?
of shared the criteria you're looking at, and so it would need to really be focused on one of those criteria being met. One procedural note I would make is this process requires another board to do a review, the Agricultural Advisory Board, which they have done a review on this. Their expertise is agriculture.
So was that done before?
This was, yeah, it was. There's
Would
no
it
certain.
always be done before
No,
we
there's
hear
no
it?
certain requirement, but there's two boards that need to make a recommendation to the county commission, the Ag Advisory Board and the Planning Commission. The Ag Advisory Board's expertise is agricultural, and so I think that's really their intent. You're a planning board, so you're looking at maybe some planning related potential issues. Some areas, as Commissioner Loves referred to, do have some planning issues related to preservation of corridors and acquisition of corridors and those of those nature, which you do have the ability to recommend that those areas be exempted out. We've won a few of those battles. We've lost most of those battles. But there has been a few that they have held out some areas that were planned for planned corridors along roadways and such. But yeah, those are the criteria that you really need to focus on in the event that you felt that it didn't warrant a positive recommendation from you.
To follow up on that, the advisory board, the Agricultural Advisory Board voted to recommend approval 5-0.
Is it common to have a request like this where there's already residential lots?
So those lots that are to the
east.
to the east of there, those are not approved buildable lots. Those are just divided pieces. I would be surprised if those were divided going through the right process.
Long time ago. Okay.
Right, but they're not developable lots as they currently exist. They do not have frontage.
But to your point, Mr. Chair, it's not uncommon to have an operator feel an encroachment coming, wanting that extra layer of protection. Some of these people that are moving in aren't used to the bailing at night and some of the smells and some of those type of nuisances that this offers a little layer of protection.
May I?
Yes, please.
Well, and also, my question would be, okay, that area there is going to be all developed into homes and whatever. Okay, now, as I recall, if those lots are divided or whatever happens over there, that landowner is notified that they are next to a agri protection area.
Correct. I might be wrong on the distance. I'm pretty sure it's 300 feet. Any subdivision within 300 feet of an agricultural protection area is required to have a note on the plat identifying that there's an agricultural protection area in the area. There's specific language specified by state code that needs to be included on a plat so that all property owners adjacent to that agricultural protection area are made aware.
Yeah, so they are, I mean, they're aware of that, and that's another layer of protection for them too.
So were they made aware of this that's come before the commission tonight?
We do. We
Noticed?
have a noticing requirement. We have multiple noticing requirements that are quite extensive that we have to send property notices out by mail. We have to post the property, and there are multiple times that we have to do that.
The noticing for this application is much more significant than the noticing that Commissioner McMullen
So
just
they've had their
referenced.
chance to,
Yeah, and it was a larger distance too.
okay.
And they'll have the chance to have, there'll be a public hearing on this at the county commission level.
Okay.
Are you ready for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm ready for a motion.
Okay, I make the motion, I move that the Utah County Planning Commission recommend approval to the Utah County Commission of the proposed creation of the Relief Mine Company 2025 Agriculture Protection Area for agriculture protection, which includes approximately 175 acres and based on the staff report and minimum findings listed above.
Moved
Second?
and seconded. Is there further discussion? Questions, commission? Seeing there's no questions, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Looks like that recommendation will be moved forward to the county commissioners. We do have an other business on there that we added to the agenda last meeting to talk about the resolution of rules of conduct for public hearings. That was sent out. I printed a copy so I have it for myself. Is there any discussion? Does anyone want to open that discussion? And where did I put it? My copy.
So as you're thinking of that, as Mr. Chair referred to, this was something that we had to train on, and there was discussion of, hey, how can we review this? And so staff has just put it on as a discussion item. You're welcome to get into depth in this tonight. You're welcome to, this is nothing, I don't think it's super pressing, so we can continue it if needed. We thought we were putting it on a meeting that was a little short, but.
Was it, so it is included in the packet for tonight?
It should be, but I've got
The
it.
last page.
The last page, okay.
Yeah.
So the only, I read through this and I guess the only thought that maybe, I guess the thought is there, are we being too liberal with allowing public comment? That's probably the question, right? Is it does it lengthen our meetings unnecessarily? Are we, collecting comment when maybe that's not really helping in the decision possibly? I don't know if that, maybe some cases that's happened, I don't know. But the only thing I could think of that could be added that might give us some lever is that maybe, this is just my only thought that I had was that maybe within maybe within 48 hours or something, maybe someone requests that it be open to comment, a particular agenda item. And only when it's been requested to be open, then we would allow people to sign up to speak to that thing. So that it's not show up and request to speak and then they're just always allowed to speak. It has to be forethought that they want to come and speak within a certain number of hours before the meeting, that they have to request that. That's the only thought that I had as an edit to this.
And I haven't looked at this at all, does state law where it addresses public hearings, does it have anywhere where it addresses whether or not people need to or can or be required to sign up beforehand, or is it that it's intended to just be open to anybody in the public who wishes to address the body?
Kind of a mixture. So it's very clear about which items require a public hearing. We kind of went through that training. That all meetings, public meetings, are public meetings to be open to the public, so people can come and observe, listen. The only time that it is required in state code to allow people to talk is when it's a public hearing. And so, as Dale kind of pointed out, we kind of backed ourselves in a corner with this resolution way back when, to where it contemplates that both public meetings and public hearings are allowing people to speak. I like the chair's suggestion. Maybe we, staff can work on some language that, I think number two is our problem. I'll pull it up, but maybe we create a number three and that's good language for a public hearing. You know, we have a way to allow people to speak through through a request, but maybe we create another one that's an optional, gives you some discretion along for a public meeting. I don't know what the parameters you want to set as, but, you know, whereas distinguish between the two. One's a public hearing when you have to do that, you know, these are the rules for a public hearing, and then a public meeting allows some discretion, whether it's a unanimous vote from or not unanimous, a majority vote from the commission or just the discretion of the chair. But at least give you some discretion.
Right. I suppose my underlying question is if we have something like number 3 that, or number 2, whichever it is, that is applicable to a public hearing, it sort of implies that if you haven't signed up, if you haven't put your name on that sheet, you will not be permitted to speak. Are we allowed to do that sort of thing to a public comment?
That's specific to a public hearing?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I would think that if someone comes to that meeting, didn't see the sign-up sheet, is sitting in the back and says, hey, I want to talk. Some comment here has triggered something in my mind. I want to speak to this. I probably hesitate to not allow them to speak, but
Right.
I'm kind of quarterbacking here without.
And if that's the case, are we creating a problem by having that written in here of this is our procedure that if you're going to speak, you're going to sign in? Or do we just take that out so that we don't give that impression?
I kind of read number 3 that they could add their name to the list as long as people were still speaking, or I mean, it's kind of how it reads, right?
Sure.
They may add their names to the list until each person has been invited to speak once.
But if they choose to not, if they, for whatever reason, don't want to walk to the back of the room.
We would allow them to speak in a public hearing. Public hearings are required by law. The statute will say you will have a public hearing before you take this action. But we're allowed to create some rules so that there's order.
Okay.
And having a list, no problem. Having a deadline, you know, a time limit, no problem. But we will always allow everyone to speak, as long as they haven't gone over their time. You have to do that in a public hearing. Now, public comment is completely different. There is no law requiring public comment. You could go through your entire meeting and never hear from the public. That's fine. The only requirement is you do it in the open meeting in the public so that they can see and hear what you're doing. That's the only requirement.
So should we add something in here that just states for a public hearing, the public will be allowed to speak. Here are the procedures. And then it's clear that we're not limiting participation. We just have rules in place.
Right.
Yeah, we can draft some. Tonight's a good example. There were no public hearings tonight. And so, to Dale's point, absent this, I mean, there was no obligation to let anyone talk tonight, other than, you know, staff gives you their presentation, and we've contemplated an applicant, and that seems reasonable to allow them to present their matter.
What would we do if we had a meeting like tonight where we weren't required to allow public comment, but we had, say, 25 people who came and they wanted to speak, but it's at the discretion of the chair, and the chair declines and they get a little rowdy? what happens then?
Where's our guy?
We got our one
He
guy.
abandoned
He
us.
has a badge and gun.
He's there, he's out there.
I mean, did you see that video from Idaho?
I think there's some value
okay.
in having a mechanism that you're not beholden to public clamor in these in administrative issues, and you don't want to be. But if you feel, or the chair, or however you designate, it's probably better to maybe have it the majority of the board, so the chair doesn't feel that pressure. But if there's a sense that there's something material here to be added that is factual and that can clarify a detrimental effect, then there's nice to have a mechanism to get that information, and maybe enough to say, hey, we need to research this a little more, and we're going to continue it and have staff verify that or whatever.
I'll mention how the county commission handles it. They deal with the same problem. Many, if not most of their decisions don't require public comment and cannot consider public clamor. So they wait till the very end, and then they have, it's on the agenda. The last thing on the agenda is public comment. And the chair will say, okay, we're finished with our business. Now we're gonna open this up to anyone in the public who wants to address the commission.
Even though a decision was already made.
Even though a decision is already made. But the reason I bring it up is because it works. I haven't heard anyone come up and say, well, I don't even know why I'm talking because you already made your decision. They still want to talk. They want to be heard about it. And the great thing about your commission is on some of your decisions, you'll be able to say, we are not like the one tonight. We are not the last body. There is another body that will hear this. And anyone in public comment who says something, your county commissioners, your elected county commissioners will hear this. CUP, it's not like that. It's done tonight. And you would have already made that decision and voted before you'd heard from everyone. It's balancing, okay? There is no right, wrong way. There may be a best practice. I don't know what it is. What this the 2013 resolution is way on the other side. It's very heavily favors public comment in this body. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it was a decision they made, a judgment they came to, and enforced it with a resolution.
Do you know why they came to that? Have you been around long enough to know why they came to that?
This guy asked.
Yeah, my hunch is, so there was a time in state law that conditional uses were subject to a public hearing, special exceptions, which was kind of a conditional use. And so I think it's just kind of a remnant of that era. That really significantly changed around 2005. And so we tried to, this was a redo of the 1992 one, if you look at the title, and we tried to kind of pare it down a little bit and distinguish between the two, but we didn't do a good enough job because there's still a contemplation that you come, you sign up, you're going to be able to speak, whether it's a public meeting or a public hearing. And we, to Dale's point about how the commission handles it, I think the Snowbird one we had a couple of months ago was a good example. I think people felt like they were heard, and that kind of seemed to temper some of the angst there. I think that they appreciated it, but it's not, you don't have to do it. We're not here to make them feel appreciated, unfortunately. I mean, we're here to make sure we're following the law on these administrative issues.
I personally like the idea of allowing the public to speak. I feel like we're doing the business of the public and as much as possible to give them a voice. Again, like say with the Sundance thing, it really didn't change anything, but the comments and even the response, I think that we got written response afterwards, is like they appreciated the fact that we actually heard them, we listened to them for that amount of time. Did it change anything? Not really, but they felt like they were heard. And so I tend to lean towards the side of listening to the public as much as possible, because there are some times when the public don't get heard very well, and I think that's a disservice to the public.
I think, this is your guys' resolution, so you guys will direct us how you want us to do this, but I think at a minimum, we probably want to, if that's the route we go, is to create some guardrails a little bit. And there have been times where it's just completely off the rails, and it's like, it'd be nice to have a mechanism to say, okay, you know, this isn't really pertinent to what we're doing here, and we've heard the voice, and let's shut it down type of deal, instead of saying, well, I'm here, I signed up, I get to speak.
I guess to you, Mr. Love, Commissioner Love, I mean, I think, and I brought this up last time we talked, is I see the value, like with the county commissioners letting people speak after. I mean, I just think it's a little frustrating to give people the impression that they can have an impact by saying something when the reality is our hands are tied. And I don't know. I just think that I'm not comfortable with that. And even, you know, so I do think maybe after is a little bit better than people don't want to stick around. But I hear you. If it matters, yeah, people should speak up. But it's a little, you know, with this meeting today, it's like, ultimately, it's like, I think you know, they're obviously having, you know, I'm kind of coming in innocently, where I'm assuming she acts like, you know, like they're not communicating. And then she comes up, and yeah, we are communicating. And so I don't know if I needed that extra information to make it harder for me to think through it more clearly, right?
I can give you a legal reason to do it the way the county commission does. So what happens is you deny something and we're sued on it. And the court will look at your record, the recording, and the plaintiff who's suing us will say, the planning commission relied on something that was said that was inappropriate. And we have to prove to the court that we did not rely on that. Well, you can see that if there's a public comment during the decision making, before the decision, it's very hard for us to say, Judge, our planning commission wouldn't do that. They know that's against the law. They wouldn't have relied on that. And the judge says, but they heard it. And worse, they talked about it.
Absolutely.
If that public comment doesn't come in until after you've made the decision, there is no way they're going to be able to do that to us. And so that's why I've been concerned about this resolution. I'm glad we're having this discussion, because that hasn't happened that I'm aware of here, but the danger's there, the risk is there.
We have had,
Absolutely.
maybe not that exact scenario, but we have had several times a conditional use process that was subject to public comment, and public comment directly swayed the decision. So the decision was they just denied it when it should have been approved, and it was the applicant sued, and it was referred back to the planning commission saying, yeah, you should have approved it. Now you guys, you can attach some conditions to it, but do your job.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a direct result of just the heat of the
Yeah, and
crowd.
I don't want to be influenced by public comment.
So I think one thing that might address your concern of maybe seeming disingenuous to the public, in Springville on our agenda, we had at the very beginning a disclosure that we would read out that just said that for this type of item, this is our process. We don't have public comment, or it's a consent item where we can't do this, or we can't do this. And so it was explained to whoever was in the meeting prior to that item coming up, this is what the procedure is. And we could have something like that for items that don't require a public hearing. We just say these items are administrative items for which there is no public hearing. Public comment will be accepted at the end of the meeting on any items that anyone wishes to bring to the commission's attention. And that way it's straightforward. Everybody knows what's going on in the meeting. They know what we can and can't do. And if there's a question, we can explain further. That's one idea of what we could do.
That's what you're saying the county commissioners do. They have it at the very end.
They do that. They don't have a notice like that, but
Yeah, but
in
I like
essence,
the
that's
idea
what
of a
they're
notice.
doing. Yeah.
Because, because sometimes these meetings can go long. Somebody's like, they need to know when they get to say something. So I like that. And that satisfies you. I do think, I agree. I think people do want to be heard. And I think that anything that impacts the public directly and it will depict, I mean, if it didn't impact her from Fairview, I mean, she wouldn't be here. So I think it's really important for people to feel like at least they were heard. I think that's huge. So you can do it at the end when it's, you know, it's less muddying up the waters.
On a different angle, we as a staff are trying to help you out a little bit, and we're over time, we've been trying to review our conditional uses and maybe determine which ones you really want. Best practice really has you limit the number of conditional uses you have because of the fact that you're already considering them as permitted. And we've tried to look at the ones that we have designated as conditional uses that we're getting the same approvals, the same conditions over, and we have migrated those over to permitted uses, subject to, you know, kind of a best practice list of conditions. And so we are trying to limit the number of conditional uses. There are some that this is
So when they
probably
get to
appropriate.
us, you've already denied several possibilities of conditional
No, what I'm
uses?
saying is we've changed these uses over to a permitted use so that they don't have to come to a public meeting. It's
And
administrative.
to make it a permitted use, that's an amendment or an ordinance
Yeah,
change
yeah,
or whatever.
we've
And
done
we do
a,
those
we've
here
done
too.
a text
or-
amendment through you guys.
Right, text
To
amendment.
bring them to you. So
Yeah,
this is what
to-
we're gonna do. You guys make the recommendation to county
To
commission.
follow up on that, well, like generally there are conditional uses where we require the same thing over and over and over again. Those conditional uses where we do that, we've reviewed and said, look, we're saying the same thing, we're requiring the same things for each of these. It's better we make them a permitted use with these conditions attached so that we're not having to have them go through an application process and have to review them when we're going to say the same thing and have the same conditions apply to them. So we just make them conditions in the ordinance.
Which is the trend in property law, that people just know what they can do with their property and they don't have to come in here and battle for it. That's where we're going with most of these things.
Well, we can continue this a little
Yeah.
further and let you guys maybe look at a little more depth and maybe bring some suggestions. Give us
We'll
some-
have a group email discussion about it.
I do think,
Can
I
play
don't
with
know.
some video chat.
I'm all about making a decision tonight if people want to, you know, do that, because I like what you talked about. Because like,
Is it an actionable item tonight?
No, this is
It's
just
just
something
for
that is a
discussion,
discussion. We can bring back some suggestions, put it on as adopt a resolution.
okay, so
next
that's a
time,
different
and so-
thing. To actually adopt a resolution.
Yeah,
is a
we're not
different-
gonna be able to adopt this tonight. We're just, notice is up to discuss it, get some ideas. We've heard a few things. We can maybe start putting something together and.
I do like the idea that as we cover different topics or different types of topics, that we kind of state up front, you know, here's reasons we could deny this, or, you know, like, I mean, just generally, so that they know, because I think a few of them, like, unless there's an impact that can't be mitigated, basically we have to approve it, right?
Yeah, that's probably the type of statement we would.
That's the
we
kind
would
of statement
create.
that we should make, right? So
Yeah,
it's
we
not
can-
like,
Well,
yeah, if we don't like it, we don't, you know, we're not gonna approve it.
yeah, and I don't know about putting those in writing or anything, but you handled it right. You handled it exactly the way the county commission handles it.
Right.
Well, staff, you need to tell us what are our parameters here? What's our discretion? What's our standard or criteria? That's fine. We will put that on the record so that it's clear you're just following the law.
Yep.
No problem.
So I,
Well, we know what those are.
I know, so that's
Eat
why,
out there. is
I mean, whether it's coming from me, or, you know, a question from me each time, or I'm saying me, but, you know, from us to you, or if we can even, you know, kind of say it up front, you know, here's the types of things that you, criteria you would use to deny this request. Or, you know, I guess we could just ask that, but I think those are the kind of things that would help kind of temper, you know, whatever comments we would get, because in the end, some of the things she brought up just weren't even in our purview. I mean, like annexation and, you know, and all that. I
I'm
mean,
confused in my head.
That's why the comment where it comes in is problematic.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
how do we prove that somehow someone's mind on the commission didn't get skewed or persuaded or off on a tangent on something? It is very hard. for
But
us
it
to do
doesn't
that.
matter in that context whether something did, I mean, if it, like, again, it made me uncomfortable, but it wasn't going to change anything, but it didn't matter whether it did or not. Like, we had to You know what I'm saying?
It complicated.
It complicated it, but ultimately it didn't matter. And I just think, I don't know if she knows that, but I
She
don't think
doesn't.
right. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like, I think I don't know. I don't like the fact that people come up here and bear their, testimony and it didn't matter. Right. And I think they should know that. I think they should know that it's not going to really matter. Like how painstaking it is for you to come up here and you came all the way up here. Whatever sob story you have isn't going to matter. And so I don't think they know that.
We can create a factual statement that kind of indicates what's being considered, and then have something that allows someone similar to the commission to be able to talk. Sometimes it does matter to someone to say, hey, I went down that far, I stood up, my voice was heard, and I'm going to go sleep tonight, and rest and feel like I said my piece. And so that situation would be similar with how the commission handles it.
Yeah.
We would state that, saying,
Yeah.
if you wish to stick around and just make a comment related to these issues, there'll be an opportunity at the end.
Yeah.
So we're not going to vote on anything tonight. So I guess if we wanted to continue this in a future meeting, it would be that we'd want to kind of come back with an amendment we would make to this resolution or whatever. I mean, this resolution is basically our ordinance, right? That we follow.
Yeah.
And so we could add another bullet point on here. We could edit one of these, whatever. But I think all we have on the agenda tonight is just to discuss it.
Yep.
And if we want to make a motion on it, I think we'd want to, would we send that in and put it on the agenda to be considered, and then?
No,
way-
there's several ways to handle this. You can request us to bring this back in our next meeting to fine tune the discussion. And then that will give staff, then at that point, you can say, I want direct staff to create this,
Amendment, and then
bring it back
vote
the
it on
following
the
month
next
for
They need direction from us.
resolution. Yeah, that'd be helpful to have some, I hear some things,
Yeah.
but it'd be nice, maybe you guys can just really fine tune those a little bit, look at everything, and then give us a list of things to put together.
Well, and I do think that it's not going to get less complicated. Things are going to get more complicated. And I just think if we fine tune it and kind of streamline it a little better so it's not as clunky. I don't know.
We'll put a few things together from what I've heard. I don't think we're gonna bring it back to maybe have it adopted, but at least further discussion, a little more zero in on a few things. That sound all right?
I mean, I think the fact that we've got, it is, laid out and kind of the rules we'll follow. I mean, I'm glad it's not just open, like, we will take public comment, for every topic, and then it's just a free-for-all, and we don't have any rules. At least we have minutes, we have, 10 minutes for, a group. I don't know, there's lots of rules in here. Probably need to know those better, but at any rate, I mean, I like the fact that it's structured.
Yeah, for sure. At a minimum, we
part's
need
good.
that, yeah.
And I just feel like I think the chances of having in the near future, even more public clamor, as you say, is only going to increase.
Yeah.
So I think we need to kind of zip it up a little bit and look at him, he's agreeing.
Absolutely.
So you might as well just get ahead of it.
Well, this is the third version since 1992, and it's it needs a refresher, for sure.
Cool.
It's nothing new.
2013.
Okay.
So I'm hearing that we'll bring this back at our next meeting with maybe some suggestions
Sounds
and
good.
kind of fine tune it. Okay.
Good plan.
Yeah, and if you
so.
guys can come up, brainstorm and come up with some suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So with that, we have reached the end of the agenda.
Move we adjourn.
Second. Yes.
Okay.
All the above.
If you listen to your training last month, we don't have to do that. The chair can just
Yeah, I was
adjourn.
gonna say, if there's nothing else on the agenda, I think we can just declare the meeting adjourned.
I hope that part
Like a
wasn't,
gravel thing.
that part wasn't being publicly.
No.